Well, I basically got into tag teach because I was absolutely desperate. I have a son with autism. He has severe autism. He's profoundly nonverbal, and he's 22 now. So I kind of found out about tag teach when he was about 6 or 7 years old. We were really desperate because he had very difficult behaviors. He basically had four or five behaviors. He would run and stomp and scream in the living room all day. He would spin and bounce, and he would hit his head and bite his hands. And he did this almost 24 hours a day. And as we were going through ABA and verbal behavior, and my son made great progress with those things. I'd never heard of Karen Pryor, but I looked her up, and I'd never heard of clicker training. But I got her book, Don't Shoot the Dog, and it all just fell into place because it showed me how I could communicate with my son. My son is still very minimally verbal, but at that time, you can't imagine what it was like. Unless you've lived it, you don't know what it's like. And we had no way to communicate with him other than kind of holding him down. It was horrible. So I realized that with the tag, I could communicate. It's a conditioned reinforcer, and then you follow it up with a reinforcer. So I read the book. I ordered the taggers. I got my little bag of treats, and then, so it took me about 2 weeks to get it all assembled. I finally have it all ready one morning. I walk downstairs. He erupts into a massive tantrum. Of course, I didn't know why. But I thought, I followed my clicker and tag teach protocols. I thought, well, what do I want? Of course, he's screaming and jumping around. So I thought, I want him to be quiet. I want him to not be jumping around. So I want both feet on the floor. I don't want him hitting his head. So I want hands down. So I started tagging and handing over a tiny piece of some kind of candy for every split second of quiet mouth, hands down, or feet on the floor. And I was very nervous while I was doing that. My heart was pounding. But 12 minutes later, he was sitting on the sofa with his hands folded and looking at me. And he had this look on his face like, how did I end up here? How did this happen? And I had done nothing because I had stood back. And I just tagged and then gave him a little treat. And so then I was amazed because I thought, I just de-escalated this tantrum in 12 minutes by doing nothing other than pressing a button and handing over a piece of something or other. And that was it. That was how I tamed that tantrum, or it de-escalated. And I never had to fear tantrums again. And when he did have tantrums, I used this procedure. The tantrums de-escalated and the tantrums decreased, significantly in intensity and the number of times that they happened, intensity and frequency. And that was very dramatic because I was able to communicate with him what behaviors I wanted. So I increased his calm behaviors, and then that set off the whole train of experimenting or me figuring out how to use this tool to deal with the horrible problems we were having because we couldn't sleep. Going to the grocery store was a nightmare. I couldn't take a walk around the block with him because he would bolt in a million directions at once, and it would take two of them. One would be circling on the right of him or the other circling on the left, or you'd have to hang on to his hands, which is, not pleasant. And so I taught him to do all of those things. My next big project, I think, was I taught him how to go for a walk with me and how to take one step at a time and to take steps in the same direction, because that was something he could not do. He could not take two steps in the same direction. Take one step, bolt one direction, then another step, bolt in another direction. You never knew where he was going to go. So once we were able to walk, well, then we could walk around the block, and then he could get exercise and we could get fresh air. And it's all described in my book, Chaos to Calm.